We noticed that the floor is contoured in one area. We began to rip up the vinyl flooring, and we uncovered what we believe is the original blood stains from the 1987 murders.
You know, her grandma was like, you make sure you lock all the doors. You know, they didn't know. It was scary.
In the heart of Iowa, amidst its whispering fields of corn and under its vast open skies, lies a house unlike any other. This is not just a story of walls and windows, but of unseen residents whose footsteps echo through the halls, long after the living have gone to sleep. Here, in this quiet corner of America, the past does not rest easy. Welcome to our journey into the unknown as we explore the hauntings of Belle Plaine.
My name's Nick. I'm from Belle Plaine. I purchased a property here in town in order to fix it up. And once we went into the house, we started finding more details about the house's history. And now I'm just kind of looking for answers.
Now, before we got into the hauntings of this specific home, we thought it was important to understand the history of Belle Plaine, Iowa. The Black Hawk War of 1832 played a pivotal role in shaping the region's future. This conflict, led by Black Hawk against the United States, centered on disputed land claims in Illinois and the desire of Native Americans to return to their ancestral lands. Despite its brief duration, the war ended in significant loss for Black Hawk's band, marking a turning point in Native American resistance to U.S. expansion. The war's aftermath paved the way for increased settlement across the Midwest, including the territory that would become Iowa. The defeat of Native American forces opened vast tracts of land to American settlers, leading to rapid development and the establishment of new communities. Among these was Belle Plaine. The arrival of the railroad in Belle Plaine in the 1860s was a transformative event for the town. The Chicago and Northwestern Railway established Belle Plaine as a crucial junction, connecting the town to major markets and making it a hub for agricultural trade. This accessibility attracted settlers, businesses, and farmers, contributing to a population and economic boom. The railroad not only facilitated the transport of goods, but also encouraged the flow of information and people, integrating Belle Plaine into the broader economic and social networks of the United States. This is where the story takes a turn. The misfortune of Belle Plaine begins with Jumbo Well. It only started as a simple drilling for an artesian well inside of Belle Plaine, but quickly turned into a disaster. This was a famous mistake because Jumbo Well was regarded worldwide as the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, when Jumbo Well was going, people would bottle up the water and try selling it as medicinal around the United States.
The water flow estimation was rumored to be between 5 million and 9 million gallons of water per day. Jumbo Well came to an end in 1887 when engineering efforts provided a solution to stopping the excessive flow of water. Fast forward to 1894, and over 60 buildings would be burned to the ground in a horrendous fire. We then noticed the amount of train accidents that would follow the Great Fire of 1894, and noticed a pattern of misfortune that was plaguing the town of Belle Plaine.
I put together a list of all of the tragic deaths that I could find after a few hours of digging that happened in Belle Plaine over the years. In July of 1897, a 50-year-old farmer named Samuel Johnson took his own life by hanging in fear that his siblings would take the farm that was willed to him by his father. In June of 1903, a young woman, Mrs. Rabe, took her life with a shotgun. Her husband was Henry Rabe. In August of 1903, that same year, Isaac Hale commit suicide at a hotel, leaving behind a letter that addresses the town of Belle Plaine and everyone that lived there, saying that he just couldn't take it any longer. In December of that same year, 1903, Mrs. Meyer was found dead with carbolic acid just a few feet from her body. In August of 1905, an infant was found in the river, anchored with an iron in a box filled with lime, which they speculated was to dissolve the body. In April of 1906, a man named Rudolf Schenken, who owned a prosperous farm, took his own life. It confused people because he was so successful. In September of 1909, a series of serious train accidents were documented. It was to the point where the railroad workers were superstitious to go to work, and they called it a hoodoo when a series of events like this happened. The first event was a man named Mr. Palmer who was walking backwards on a train car. He worked for the railroad, and he fell backwards off of the car and was chopped into pieces, as the newspaper described, by the wheels. Just a short time after, there was a head-on collision which demolished 2 of the trains. A switch engine ran into stock cars and demolished all of them. Again, while this is happening, all of these railroad workers are living in this town and they're feeling uncomfortable about going to work, wondering if they're going to be next. In February of 1910, we see an arrest made in a decade-old murder of Frances Guthrie. Frances was thought to have taken her own life by suicide, but they found out her husband actually hired someone for $500 to monitor her after he felt that she was cheating. They arrested him and his accomplice for murder. In the 60s, Belle Plaine had a young woman named Jean Formanek who ended up winning Miss Iowa. She went on to be a finalist in the Miss America pageant, but was tragically killed in a car accident in 1967. She was 24 years old and had just recently become a teacher. On August 20th, 1975, we get a call for 19-year-old Connie Lee Kirkman at 3 a.m., where she was found shot 4 times in the head. Her husband, Donald Kirkman, had waited to call, and when the police arrived, they asked what happened, and he said an intruder came in and he shot at him, but he got away. He later confessed to the murder. However, the judge ruled that it was against his Miranda rights, and he ended up being released, and the murder was never solved. Just outside of town, on October 8th, 1992, a body was found completely burned, padlocked to a tree. They speculated that it was a suicide, but they were still investigating. We see a continuation of these incidents from 2005 to 2000, 2009. All of these are recent, so we can't give the details, but the same type of incidences are occurring, including murder, suicides, and mysterious deaths that appear to be a murder but are never convicted.
So this is the start of our investigation at the Belle Plaine, Iowa house. Now, this is probably one of the most intriguing houses that I've ever even researched. The opportunity to this case is probably once in a lifetime, at least for me, out of all the places I've been. The history of not only this town, but this house is something out of a fictional movie set. And I know that sounds very cliche, but we start digging into the history of not only this particular house, but the rest of this town. And it seems like it's been riddled with misfortune and bad luck and death over, 150 years. Dating all the way back until the 1800s, where I think this story starts. And Beckie's going to be taking up a lot more of the research role on this case. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Beckie here for this particular case is there's certain components of how this case went down that she's going to have expertise that I don't know anybody else that would have that same expertise. And I feel like that's something valuable to bring to this investigation. And we want to approach this from a very scientific standpoint. We're not going to sensationalize anything. Everything that we report, whether it be something as nuanced as asking a question to somebody at a Dollar General store, to as in-depth as being in the house and conducting an investigation, reporting everything, recording everything, and trying to draw correlating lines between what we experience, not only with equipment, but also with ourselves. So we wanted to set that standard from the beginning. This is the start of this video, as you guys are kind of taking in right now, but we are filming this as much like a documentary as possible, literally documenting almost every single thing that we do, whether that's going to eat dinner, going to get batteries. We're keeping track of everything because we feel like so much is lost, because whenever we just go to a location and drop the history of the location and do an investigation and we're out in 4 hours or 8 hours, there's a lot of lines that are lost. And with this particular case that we're going to introduce to you guys today, it's very critical that we don't only focus on the house, but the rest of the city and socioeconomic culture of this place that feeds into why some of these things possibly could have happened. So before I go off in this deep wormhole about the case and the history of the town, do you guys have any initial thoughts on what we've learned so far?
That there's like nobody in this town. Even rolling up, there isn't a lot of development. It's mostly fields, so there's not a lot to do. We didn't see any shopping centers coming in or anything like that. So even in the modern day, before we start peeling back the layers and looking at history, we have nothing. This town is almost like isolated, and it's pretty much one street with mostly defunct businesses.
It's very small, so you would think that everyone would know what happened, but people are very sketched out when you ask them about it.
Yeah, and we've already
No one
talked to...
really wants to openly share so far.
And I think part of it may be because it's only recently been open to investigations. We're the fourth team in here, and there's been a few that have come before us, some that have done more in-depth stuff, some that have done less in-depth stuff, but we're trying to essentially create the best log for anyone that comes after us to be able to go into this house, understand the history of not only the house, but the town, and hopefully build a case log after investigation, or after each investigation, where we can kind of build up on why this place could possibly be haunted. And I think that's the best initial observation, is we don't know that it's haunted.
No.
We have a report from the owner that it's haunted, and we have certain things from different teams that have said that they've had activity, but that level of activity could very well be something in the house causing these devices to go off. So we haven't done any baseline readings. We've done a single walkthrough on the house right when we pulled up, just to see how it was, get a layout feel with the owner, but we didn't have any equipment. We didn't do any kind of baseline readings. So I think the first thing that we do when we go investigate is obviously get the baseline.
Yep.
But before we get to that point, I think it's very critical that we introduce to our audience what we're dealing with. Because this is something, again, this is a once-in-a-lifetime case. And I think once I get into the history and we go through the research of what we found, the people at home are going to see that. So before I get any deeper into this, I want to read you guys the police report on what happened at this house. Now, I'll give you a quick rundown on essentially why we're here. There was a family that lived in that house. It was two elderly parents and a son that was disabled from a workplace accident. Now, on one night, he decided that he was going to cut the phone line and take a shotgun to both of his parents' heads before taking his own life. Now, where this story gets really grim is the bodies weren't found for days.
Sure, and it's July.
Yeah.
So
a lot of humidity, a lot of heat, and just briefly, what can you as a mortician
right.
add in a professional capacity on what that would look like from a decomp standpoint?
So what we're looking at is July, and what most people don't realize is decomposition doesn't take weeks. Mm-hmm. It can happen essentially overnight in the conditions presented in a house that probably didn't have air conditioning. Even the newspapers are reporting this. So every article pretty much mentions badly decomposed bodies. And if we're talking a few days in the middle of summer out here, it's going to be we are going to have the odor. So there are two organic compounds called putrescine and cadaverine that happen as the body begins to decompose. And that is the smell that can only be described as putrefying flesh. That it's a distinct odor that almost any medical responder, police officer, and mortician would be able to recognize. So someone walking into that, it's not going to be pleasant.
And there was actually a few people that I was going to potentially interview that were riding around the house after things had happened. We do have probably what I would say would be gold in the paranormal field is we have a police report from the day that the officer that responded to a wellness check call showed up to the house. So the mail was filling up. The mailman decided to get a hold of the authorities and said, can we please do a wellness check? So I think I'll go ahead and do the police report because I'm not going to be able to say the story better than the officer that wrote the report from that direct eyewitness account. So I'll go ahead and lay this out for you guys. So the date, July 15th, 1987. It was approximately 1 p.m. and it was here in Belle Plaine, Iowa. And they have redacted some of the personal details of the officer just out of his privacy. But he received a phone call at the Belle Plaine Police Department at 1 p.m. And he received that from the mail carrier for the city of Belle Plaine to go to this particular address. And they stated on the phone that he thought that something was wrong at the residence because no mail had been picked up for several days and he could smell something coming from the house. So this is standing on the outside of the house. No one's inside of the place yet, and they can already smell this the decomposition of the family that was inside. And we'll continue on here. I arrived at about 1:05 p.m. and talked to the mailman for a short time on the sidewalk. And an older lady who is a neighbor saw myself talking, and she told me that she had not seen any activity around the house for several days. I walked up to the house and looked in a bedroom window facing the front of the house. I could see the outline of a person lying in the bed under the covers. I shouted very loudly to the person, but got no response. I detected a strong smell of something dead coming from the window, and there were a lot of flies on the window. At that time, the mailman left to continue his mail route, and I went to the front door and knocked very loudly. The neighbor stated to me that there were 3 people that lived there, the father, the wife, and a son who was in his mid-30s. I got no response from knocking. I then tried the screen door, which was locked. I forced the screen door open and then tried the inside door, which was also locked. I kicked the inside door down, and the smell of something dead was so strong it burned my eyes. So I'm going to pause right there because as she's already stated, right, this is a process that your body will kick into pretty quickly, especially in those conditions. And officers many times are responding to calls where they are going to recognize what a dead body smells like. But I think what's interesting with this one is that a lot of people in the area knew there was something wrong because people detected that there wasn't any activity. In a town this size,
People notice things.
everyone knows everybody.
Yeah.
And when you don't see people for days on end,
Red flags.
there's starting to be questions asked. I walked into the house and was standing in the living room looking south. I could see a fan running, blowing into the bedroom, the same bedroom that I had looked in from the outside of the house. I then walked into the bedroom and observed a person in bed covered up to the neck. His entire face was gone from a blast from a gun. I then observed remains of his head on the west wall. I turned around, walked back to the living room, and walked south into the next room. I first observed a light on the east wall of the second room. Also, the television set was on. I then saw an older lady lying on the floor, face up, with her head pointing west. She was lying in a pool of dried blood. She was in the center of the room. The smell was so strong and burning my eyes that I could go no further and see. I went back out the front door and went west to the first house. The neighbor I was talking to asked me what was wrong, and I replied that I had found 2 dead people inside and that they looked like they were older people. She stated, "I wonder where the son is." I replied, "I don't know." I caught my breath and went back inside to where the lady was lying and looked into the bedroom to the west. I observed a gun laying on the bed. It appeared to be a shotgun. Once again, the smell was so strong that I could not go any further. I walked back out the front door and asked if I could use her phone, and then I called the Belle Plaine answering service, and I'm assuming he got a hold of the next step up in terms of probably the sheriff's department. And it goes on from that point, but I think we get the gist, right? He essentially stumbled upon both the family members that were killed, and then the man that took his own life that killed his parents. And I mean, that's the fact that we have the police report, and we can go in the house today, and there is still blood / human remains left in the space, is something that's very, very unique about this case. It's not like other places where we go where we have the history and, you know, we know what happened
so
there.
Far removed, but here it feels very like.
It feels like they almost just applied a Band-Aid to this entire situation.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to be pulled off, and it's a lot uglier than people remember. And I think that's something, even for me, the gravity of walking in that door and being able to lay out exactly where this took place, I think is something that I've never had the advantage of having when doing an investigation. Is not only do we have an idea of what went down in that space, but we have literal exact specifications on where people were at this time and what he was walking into at that time. But I think with this particular case, it's very critical that obviously respect and going at it with a respectful approach is huge, but there is a lot more depth to this entire case, and not just this single incident, but in this town as an entirety. As we've both looked, you've got murder-suicides, you've got plenty of standard suicides. There's something going on here, and I don't think it's paranormal, or I don't think it's all paranormal, but there's definitely something happening here where people are dying at an accelerated rate based upon the amount of people that live here.
On the community pages, they actually have multiple times tried to get together to address the amount of suicides and how they're struggling to approach them and find a solution to make it stop happening. There was an accident at some point, and they mentioned, oh, we need to do something about this. And it ended up being an unrelated accident, but the fact that people were jumping to conclusions that it was already another incident of mental health. It's a mental health crisis in a lot of these. And that doesn't mean the two can't play on each other, but at the end of the day, this is definitely a town that's experiencing that, and it's not something that started recently. Like most of the time you can pinpoint, oh, it was a pandemic, there were things going on, but all the way back into 1909, 1910, we're seeing people that are putting their infant in the river to discard them, and they did unfortunately pass away. An elderly woman was killed by two men. There are people leaving their family homes from this area and going and getting involved in, gangs of the time. So there's just a lot going on here, and I don't know if it's because it's isolated to a small town and the only way out is to fight out for some people.
Okay, so I don't even know what to say. One of the people that we were going to potentially interview for this just lost their son today. Like 4 hours from when I'm recording this video. So I'm not even going to go over there and ask for them to do an interview. I'm not going to do that. But it is very odd. And I think a recurring theme that there's just an enormous amount of misfortune, bad luck, death in this small little town in Iowa. And I don't really know why. Hopefully, we can try and figure out some of these answers through research and through investigations, but this is an odd case from the beginning. I also want to make a note here. When we pulled up to this town, it was 70 degrees, clear skies, sunny. And now it is about 49 degrees, and we have an enormous storm moving in. So it's like the moment we got to this town, everything started to go south. So we're here at the treasure of the Midwest, Casey's. I don't know how I feel about Casey's, but they got aight stuff. Pizza's okay. In this town, this is like all there is, so I can't complain too much, I guess. Might give me an energy drink. We're about to go over to the house and do our baseline readings, maybe a little investigating. But here we go. Okay, we got sandwiches here, pizza, more pizza. Let's try it out. Okay, so I got me cheese bites and a chicken sandwich. Oh wait, hey, wait, come here. Come here, come here. Get over here. What did you get? What did you get? Which one?
Sour Patch Kids, because they don't have any good ones. They don't have the Strawbango margarita.
Strawbango? What do I want? The Rainstorm. Guess I'll go with Rainstorm. The Rainstorm. 2 for $4.50. So I don't drink a ton of energy drinks anymore. I used to be a big energy drink guy, but I don't know, with the ghost hunting, it's like a thing to have poor nutrition, so I'm trying to make it a little bit better. Not doing too well today though, but we got to get a quick one in.
It's like a roach.
Okay, we're going into the murder house. Yeah, I got the keys.
He said yes.
Okay. So we were here in the Belle Plaine murder house, and we are doing a quick baseline reading test, as well as kind of laying out for you guys where everything happened in this environment. So over here, this is something we're going to be testing tonight when we come back in with our UV light. This is supposedly part of the body decomp, bodily remains, fluids, but this actually was not here when the 87 murders took place. So in the police report, it talks about the woman was laid facing the west in the center of the room. If you take this part out, this very well could be considered close to the center of the room. So we're going to test that tonight to see if that's actually what we think it is. Now this is the room that Fox Jr. would have taken his own life in. And they actually put this particle board over the original walls. They didn't clean any of it. And they stuck this as a band-aid on top of it to cover up all of that and continue to rent this place out. Now, they would have found him in here with a shotgun, and then his father would have been in the room right here with the fan sitting here blowing into his room, and this would have been where his father was. So that's kind of the layout of the Fox murders. Based off of the police report, this would have been the door that the police officer would have come through when he said that the stench was so bad that it was burning his eyes. Okay, so I've got an EMF meter here. We're just going to go around because a lot of the teams that have come before us have had activity. And we wanted to see if there's anything that could be triggering this that's not paranormal. So we're taking baseline readings essentially everywhere. There's not supposed to be any power in this house. So we're just kind of seeing if anything here is giving signature. Let's get right up next to the outlet here. Okay.
Oh, hello. It's 30 degrees.
What am I standing on?
Outlets aren't giving me anything.
Here we go.
Did you just hear that?
Yeah, what was that?
Something up there.
Oh, is it the door outside? Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. At first I thought it was the floor being pressed
Yeah, I think it's the storm door.
Okay.
Is that right? Okay. Yeah, I heard that too. I was like, what the heck is that? Nothing.
This isn't even giving us one. I'm not getting anything. But I think a valid consideration also could be the temperature here. So a lot of this stuff doesn't like to work when it gets this cold. Do you have your phone on you, Savannah?
I don't.
Hold this real quick. I want to see, just make sure it's working correctly. Let's see.
No.
Not taking anything. Okay, so that's not good.
Hers wasn't working at first either, and then she put her phone up to it to check, and now it is.
Whoop.
Oh. What was that?
Oh, wait, hang on. Let me try this. Okay, now we're getting a reading there.
What's your reading?
No, it wasn't working there for a second, but then it decided to work.
What is your reading in milligauss that you're getting?
For my phone,
No, just like in general in the house.
I'm just getting, mine's just reading 0.
Okay, but
What are you getting?
This is by the wall with all those wires, right?
Yeah, this is something to take note of, is
On the
how small
outside.
this house is.
They're all in that one little
Okay.
area.
it's coming and going, so it'll say like 0 and then it'll say like 40. And then it says like 2, 0. So that's why I don't understand. Yeah.
Well, we've also got the power lines right here.
Well, and that's why I'm wondering if it's fluctuating like that.
That is kind of weird.
But I think you could very well have interference.
Look. $90, $180, $200. That's the highest it's been.
220, 230, 240. You might have to do it with that camera.
Let me get on this other side.
Okay, and now look. It's going down.
So something is cycling, right?
That's what I'm thinking, is that like as things pass through, then you get a wave of it.
Like something non-paranormal is cycling. For those that might be confused on what I'm saying, there's a...
Nothing over here.
Yeah, I didn't get anything in there.
Okay, so when things are passing through those wires over there,
That's
then
what it is.
It's giving waves of EMF, which is going to cause waves of activity while people are investigating in this house. So that's literally exactly what we thought. So EMF devices, responses from EMF triggered devices are not going to be...
The only thing that I think that we could use that's EMF based would probably be.
Well, yeah, like some, it has to be a certain threshold of EMF to trigger.
It would have to be. I have 2 devices that we could essentially mitigate.
So here, because it's not going to make your stuff go off
What are you getting up
constantly.
here?
20.
On the mill.
It said 30, then 20, and now it's gone. So
wait, can we time this?
So it's not going to make your stuff go off constantly, which is going to make people think.
yeah, because it's
something
gonna
else.
it's gonna facilitate a response at
Random times, yeah.
Yep.
So you could essentially just ask enough questions, and you'll have something
Happen.
line up.
And then because it seems like that question triggered the response, people are gonna go, "Whoa!"
Go
like
with that narrative.
That trigger worked the best. Let's keep
Yeah.
asking questions about that. And that's what our theory was beginning looking at this. But particularly that window right there, around there, where all of those wires are. So even though this house doesn't have electricity, it's still connected to that. There's still gonna be things passing through the power lines because there's
Yeah.
other houses on the street. So
So that really kind of throws a wrinkle in, because every other investigator that's come before us, I don't know if they did baselines or not.
Right.
well, and they might have taken temperature, they might have done other things, but from what it sounds like, they're going with REM. Baselines don't matter if you're taking REM pod responses from a place that has fluctuating EMF along the wall of the house.
Yeah, because that right there will cause REM pods to activate.
And to them, how are they going to think that it's fishy when it's like randomly going off? But it's really not random. It's when
Yep.
the power is
because they're going to be like, the REM pod didn't do anything the whole time.
Right.
And I'm not just saying REM pods, I mean K2, any
Yeah.
other device.
Yeah, you're getting something with a cyclical response.
And it's a surge. So it's not
Yeah.
like some of these, it's like, okay, you can argue that they only measure a certain amount of EMF, but when it's spiking like that, when you go from having a reading of 20 there to over here, it's like 140.
yeah.
Put the Mel back in this window really quick. And Savannah, you'll have to record it just because this one doesn't do well with that much exposure. But I want to see if we can time this. Mine just actually picked that spike up over here. This bounced to like 90 milligauss. What's that one at? 310? 150?
150, 650.
I don't know if the
120.
camera's
Picking it up or not?
Back the camera up here.
I'm messing it up.
no.
No, so
Now it's at zero.
Now it's at
Now it's
zero.
at
Now it's at 340. So it literally is going from 0 to 340.
In a matter of like seconds.
0.
Yeah. So that's going to make it really hard.
So it's going from like 0 to hundreds.
Yeah.
So pretty much anything EMF based in here, including REM pods, is going to be very hard to use to establish any kind of legitimate response.
Even if you had a few questions in a row line up, like
Doesn't matter.
no, it doesn't matter. There's no way to disprove.
Because this wall on the outside, we'll show you, is lined with wiring and power boxes.
It's this window specifically too.
Yeah.
And this is the closest one to... But I feel like even with some of the equipment, you could have something over here,
Far away and it's going to be affected.
and it would probably be affected.
Right.
Especially if there's a big enough surge coming through.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that we came in to see this, because that's what we theorized with looking at the layout of this house was, even though the power's off.
It's also too like the way that the houses are situated in comparison to the power lines here.
Everything's super congested.
It's very congested, very close, like all on top of each other.
This is exactly right.
No, I'm trying to. Three, 4, 5, 6, 20. And I'm backing away from it.
10.
Well, I turned the sensitivity down.
Yeah.
So that's the same as the hundreds. But.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's still getting a consistent
Yeah,
reading.
even if we're not measuring as sensitively. Yeah, 24. That's also not a normal EMF level for a
Which, again, I think that's something to mention here. Mine just blipped.
Weird.
Something to mention is there is side effects to being exposed to high levels of electromagnetic energy.
Yeah, it's going to make you paranoid. It's going to make you, hallucinate. It can happen. It can make you just feel off. You can feel nauseous.
Or like anxious, kind of.
Anxious, anxiety, and not knowing why you feel off. Imagine what these people are thinking. They're racking what's going on, and that's right outside along the walls where the windows are.
So, like, if you're sitting here, for 4 years living here, and you have a lot of these outside environmental factors that you're not even considering
Right.
when someone's here, this is a bad recipe for...
Well, and then coming in to investigate too, and like you don't even realize that you're feeling all these things that are not.
But it seems like this wall right here is like the absolute worst.
The main contributor to it.
For that energy bleed through. Even though the power in the house is off,
Yeah.
this is still giving us, it's going to give false readings to anyone that comes in here with equipment. If you're looking for EMF-based interactions.
Which I feel like what we've heard so far is a lot of EMF-based
REM pods
responses.
K2
that people
meters.
got.
The other thing, so we have water damage, things like that going on. There was an explosion here a water leak here that cost thousands of dollars. So there's going to be that, and it leaked into the basement, which made mud, which is going to make mold. So this house has mold and really high EMF that fluctuates. So the fact that it's not like a standard that you're used to because it's changing.
Well, it's like, even with me right now, I'm getting a slight headache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You
I-
can
and-
feel that
And
it
that's not even
affects
talking
you.
about the cigarette smoke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can look right here.
It's cold
Look at
today,
these
but
vents.
when it was warm, you could smell.
You can smell it.
Yep.
These vents right here were white at one point.
There's
That
just, like-
thermostat was white at one point. But you can
Glowed
see-
in all directions.
You can see that
Oh
the
my
cigarette
gosh.
smoke in here has caused these to go yellow, which
Yeah.
is the telltale sign.
And like, look at the ceiling.
Right, and they have this drop ceiling, but we don't know. Look at the glass right here.
Yeah, it's
This is supposed to be
yellow.
clear, and it is completely yellow. So these are all considerations that we must take when investigating this place. So that really kind of discounts any I'm feeling nauseous, my head's hurting. After our baseline readings, we noticed that there were some fluctuations in EMF on one of the walls. After this discovery, we wanted to talk with the owner to get his account of his first paranormal experience inside of the home.
Back in September when I purchased the property from the bank, it was full of garbage. And I went in with some garbage sacks. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. When I was cleaning, I was standing by the front door with my back turned to the first bedroom. And as I was cleaning up vodka bottles and Pepsi bottles and just random stuff, I heard shh. And when I looked over my right shoulder, I seen something darker than a shadow go back into the back bedroom.
Now, before we jump to the conclusion that this house is haunted or that we debunked any activity that was going on here, we wanted to conduct a few interviews to see if anyone else in the city of Belle Plaine experienced paranormal activity.
My wife died 11 years ago.
Uh-huh.
We'd sit and watch TV at night,
Uh-huh.
and I'd fall asleep. She'd always wake up, go to bed, it's time to go to bed. About a week after she died, I fell asleep in my chair watching TV. Somebody shook my shoulder and says, "Wake up, go to bed." And I jumped up.
Expecting to see her.
I don't know whether I dreamed it or was her ghost. But
That's funny.
I never wanted to say this with my wife around me. I'll be laying in bed and it feels like somebody is getting in bed with me and she's not even home.
These are just a few stories that we were able to interview folks in Belle Plaine about. But something that is apparent is that people were experiencing paranormal activity in or around their homes more frequently than we thought.